I'll now give the floor to Mr. Mattias Guyomar, President of the European Court of Human Rights. Monsieur Mattias Guyomar, Président de la Cour européenne des droits de l'homme.
The bitter lesson of suffering has strengthened our will to prevent such a disaster from ever happening again, as long as we have the strength to avert it. It would indeed be a milestone in the history of law if human rights were not only protected within national frontiers, but if beyond these, any person whose human rights were injured could ask for the protection of an European court. Mr. Kissinger, Germany, 1950. What we must fear today is not the seizure of power by totalitarianism by means of violence, but rather that totalitarianism will attempt to put itself in power by pseudo-legitimate means. Mr. Benevuti, Italy, 1949. This convention means that the European community as a whole guarantees to keep democracy alive in all its member states, and that the freedom of the common man in any country is the concern of the whole. Mr. Roberts, United Kingdom, 1950. Those who have never lived in an authoritarian country cannot grasp the fact that it is impossible to be free of it without effective outside help. Europe must not be an artichoke from which the leaves are plucked one by one. We must make of our Europe a block of marble, a block of iron. Mr. Baker, Germany, 1950.
What this collective safeguard would bring us, if you would kindly agree to our efforts, well, first, for each of these millions of men and women, it would bring security, the feeling that these rights and freedoms, which they have won after so many centuries of effort and hardship, after so much pain and suffering, wars, riots, revolutions, after so much blood and tears, will now be guaranteed, safeguarded against any domestic arbitrariness by the European authorities in whom they are placing their trust, and who should sometimes inspire confidence in us too. Mr. Tidjen, France, 1949. 75 years after these powerful and inspirational words were spoken during the travaux préparatoires which led to the drafting of the Convention for the Protection of Human Rights and Fundamental Freedoms, the founders of the convention system still guide us and enjoin us by proclaiming the promise of never again, by giving themselves and giving us the means of avoiding the return of horror. They teach us lessons in history, a terrible history, that of the interwar period, which they lived through, which they endured through tragedy and barbarity, the advent of National Socialism, fascism, totalitarianism, and then the calamity of the Second World War and the horror of the Holocaust. And it's based on their experience. They who resisted, fought, and sometimes endured in their very flesh the nightmare engendered by the European continent, that they dreamt of a utopia founded on the ideals of renewed peace and justice, one they carried through sheer determination, one they managed to realize by building at a European scale a political project in which democracy is rooted in the rule of law. Ladies and gentlemen, today we celebrate the anniversary of the Convention, this legal humanistic treaty signed in Rome on the 4th of November 1950, a legacy for which we are all the trustees, the member states, their domestic authorities, the Council of Europe, the bodies of the Council gathered here during this solemn hearing, Her Excellency, President of the Republic of Malta, in the name of the Committee of Ministers that your country currently presides, Secretary General of the Council of Europe, President of the Parliamentary Assembly of the Council of Europe. No need to exaggerate to find similarities between today and the interwar period. Faced with external threats, societies respond with crisis and polarization. Economic crisis feeds into democratic crisis and an increasing defiance towards the existing system, and more particularly the international order and multilateralism. The fears compound anger and amplify hate speech and violence, misogynistic and homophobic rhetoric, parochialism, the mirage of populism and illiberalism, the erosion of our attachment to humanistic values, to the principles of pluralism and tolerance. In some respects, I would dare say, the situation we see today is without precedent. We are facing simultaneously the singular impact of new technologies and social media on individual behaviour and aspirations, major crises such as the pandemic and climate change, and the return of war on European soil. And it's precisely in such troubled times that the convention system was designed by those who were aware of backsliding and those who had the courage to build an unprecedented system never seen before. Voices today are being raised to denounce this legacy, this heritage, when in fact, on the contrary, we need to demonstrate its resilience, its capacity to protect the rights acquired over the past 75 years. It is our shared responsibility to make it flourish in order to preserve this shared legacy of ideals and political traditions, which are the trademark of our European culture. This Europe, which is the enemy of ancient barbarity and which unreservedly defends honesty, humanity, and civilization, to paraphrase Mr. Cox, who spoke on behalf of the United Kingdom in 1949. The Convention is a treaty, one born of the sovereign will of 12 founding states, one which today enjoys a legitimacy of 46 signatories and has matured with the adoption by state signatories of its 16 protocols, a treaty which idiosyncratically turns individuals into subjects of international law while placing the state at the core of the protection system. First, with the sovereign choice made by the high contracting parties to instill collective and mutual safeguards. Then, in the very heart of the system, by making the state the final guarantor of the effective respect of human rights under the supervision of the court, the judicial body of the Council of Europe, which is tasked with interpreting and applying the Convention. And then, finally, subsequently, by giving to states, via the Committee of Ministers, the task of supervising the execution of the judgments of the court. And today, I pay tribute to the ambassadors, to the permanent representatives, to the Council of Europe. Ladies and gentlemen, the Convention is a treaty. It's a text. It was written in a few weeks following committed, impassioned debates in line with the 1948 Universal Declaration, a text which proclaims fundamental rights. They are fundamental because they are at the very foundation of humanity, and they are also founded by people. It is a text which is deliberately broad and open in its provisions to keep up with the times, to be able to, thanks to the interpretation by the court, uphold at any time, in any era, in all contexts, concrete and effective rights, both the expression and the condition of human dignity. The court is fulfilling its role when it applies the Convention to contribute through its judgment to decriminalising same-sex relationships between adults, the abolition of corporal punishment in schools, the protection against intimate partner and domestic violence, the defence and the upholding of the best interest of the child. But the court must stay true to the intentions of the founding fathers and never go beyond its judicial mission. But the Convention is not just a treaty, it's more than that. It's the expression of a political vision founded on the respect of the subsidiarity principle and the search for a common denominator. It's a vision which has been transposed into the legal and institutional architecture of the Convention system. This architecture sets out universal rights of which the substance stems from the political and legal traditions of European states. The standards set by the court are rooted in domestic legal orders, which makes it easier to incorporate them by domestic authorities. And as Mr. Norton, in the name of Ireland, said in 1950, we want to see enshrined in the legislation of various countries something which, at least to some degree, will constitute a sort of island fortress for humanity. Fully upholding the legal biodiversity of the convention system, which at the level of the court can be seen in the range of different profiles and backgrounds of the 46 judges elected by the Parliamentary Assembly of the Council of Europe. Well, it is ensured thanks to the subsidiarity principle, this governing principle, which since the protocol number 15 has been in the preamble. It's a subsidiarity which procedurally entails exhausting domestic remedies and substantively means giving to states a certain margin of appreciation. The institutional frame, designed 75 years ago, rests both on the separation of powers and the shared responsibility between the court and the domestic authorities. And here I should like to also pay tribute to the French authorities who represent the host state tonight. The convention also represents hope, the hope not only of safeguarding human rights, but also of further developing them. The convention is a utopia. It is necessary as much today as it was in 1950. It seeks to counter might, force, violence, brutality with the law, regulation through rights and remedies, thanks to justice and fairness. It is a constitutional instrument of the European public order, and thereby the convention protects individual rights and contributes to the vitality of the rule of law and the smooth functioning of democracy. Not only is the political democracy a fundamental feature of the European public order, but the convention was designed to promote and maintain the ideals and values of a democratic society, as set out by the court in its Grand Chamber judgment of 2004, Gorzelik and others against Poland. Every time it rules or decides in order and according to its prerogatives to condemn arbitrary detention, to defend freedom of expression, the integrity of an electoral process, the independence of the judiciary, the court thereby deploys the convention to protect the very foundation of the rule of law and democracy. On the 9th of July 2025, in this celebratory year, the court handed down a Grand Chamber judgment in the case Ukraine and the Netherlands against Russia, one of the most significant judgments since its inception. And the court showed through that judgment the urgent need for the convention by finding serious and systematic violations of human rights committed in Ukraine, and I pay tribute to the Minister of Ukraine present here tonight, since 2014, and then following the invasion in February 2022, the court has affirmed, and let me quote the judgment, these actions seek to undermine the very fabric of the democracy on which the Council of Europe and its member states are founded by their destruction of individual freedoms, their suppression of political liberties, and their blatant disregard of the rule of law. The convention, so fragile, so precious, is in our hands. It is the convention that unites us figuratively this evening and also tonight here at the Human Rights Building on today, the 4th of November 2025. This is more than a simple tribute. This is a commitment strengthened by realism, vigilance, guided by beliefs and optimism. It's a renewed promise to be present, which we promised the authors of the convention 75 years ago. This conscience that sounds the alarm, to quote Mr. Teitgen, that we share with them and that we must bring to life. Thank you for your attention.